Question number 5, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister and asks, does he stand by all of his government's policies?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, yes.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Why won't he change his policies to embrace the call by the prestigious science body, the Royal Society, who has called for strong government leadership to create a smart green economy, one that is low carbon, resource efficient and socially inclusive?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the government is going down the path of making sure that there are quite a number of aspects of the economy that would encourage people to have a more greener economy, and they include obviously the emissions trading scheme. They include the enormous amount that we're spending in terms of science, that is renewable energy and the areas that we're involved there. Mr. Speaker, the government does support that, but some of these initiatives will also have to stand on their own 2 feet.
Supplementary.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. How does the government's repeated efforts to erode the emissions trading scheme and remove a price from carbon assist the New Zealand economy to go down a smart green direction?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, the carbon price currently in place in terms of the New Zealand emissions trading scheme reflects the international price. But I think what the member has made quite clear, and I think it's an important point, and I congratulate him for making it, is that any Labour Green government, as much as they're talking to each other, would have a much higher price on carbon. Of course, that would drive up the price for consumers. That is a statement of fact that under a Labour Greens government you would see higher electricity prices for New Zealanders.
Supplementary.
Order. Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Has the Prime Minister then not read the latest report from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change that found that successful action on climate change would shave just 0.06% of expected annual economic growth rates, while in the process protecting our children from dangerous human-caused climate change?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what I have read is a variety of reports that say it makes sense actually to do things that will support our ambitions to have an environment which has reducing carbon emissions, and that includes energy efficiency, which is why the government's been involved in the installation of well over 300,000 homes. That's why the government wants to have flexibility, for instance, in electricity. I note that the member was on his feet some time ago last year, essentially talking about something he doesn't talk about anymore, which is New Zealand Power. But the effect of New Zealand Power, of course, is to lock Genesis and Huntly in particular into remaining a coal-fired power plant. And Mr. Parker, who he used to talk to a while ago before they had a big bust-up, he says rubbish. But actually the effect would be to make sure that Huntly never converts from being a coal-fired power plant to being a combined cycle gas plant. That is terrible for New Zealand's emissions, and that's what bad economic policy spells, and that's why Mr Norman's policies are wrong for the country.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russell Norman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If the government's climate policies are so successful, why is it that New Zealand's net emissions have increased 20% under the years of this government so far and are projected to increase by a further 50% in the next decade, according to the Ministry for the Environment, based on the current policy settings?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, we just don't simply accept the statements made by the member. I think there are a number of measures we can use which show that New Zealand's emissions per unit of GDP output have dropped, and they've dropped significantly since 1990. But, Mr. Speaker, in the end, New Zealand is a small part of global emissions. We're anywhere between 0.14% or certainly less than 0.2%. We have a considerable suite of initiatives we're applying, and I think they're the right settings for New Zealand. That member wants to put more cost on New Zealand consumers, and I just hope in the election campaign he will be honest and upfront with New Zealanders and tell them exactly that, because that is the truth. But if he doesn't, I will tell them for them.
You'll make up all sorts of things.
Order. Supplementary.
Supplementary question.
Supplementary question. Dr. Russell Norman.
With regard to the government's policy to turn its back on green economic opportunities, is he aware that 25
Order. I can't hear the question because of the yelling. Could the member start his question again?
With regard to the government's policy to turn its back on green economic opportunities, is he aware that 25 of the world's largest banks, including the Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, Citi, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, Goldman, HSBC and Morgan Stanley, recently released, in fact today, the governance framework for a green bond market, which is seeing billions of dollars flow into green economic opportunities around the world? Why does this government not want to be part of the green global economic revolution?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, New Zealand's not stopping, and the government's certainly not stopping any New Zealanders being involved in bonds or other instruments if they wish to be. But, Mr Speaker, what I can say is the government's got a record which shows that on many, many fronts it's tackling climate change. I will make the point, though, that we are a very, very, very small cog in a global ocean, and unless other countries are prepared to play their part, then nothing New Zealand can do in isolation will actually resolve the issues of international greenhouse gas emissions rising.
Supplementary.
So, supplementary. Point of order, the Honourable Jerry Brown.
Mr Speaker, I just ask you to reflect on the way that question was started and the very, very long speech-like introduction to it. It's not compliant with standing orders. It's not appropriate for someone to suppose the policies of the government, just as it, of course, has been pointed out to the government that we shouldn't be predicting the policies of the Labor Party or, for that matter, the Green Party, although, I've got to say, they are very predictable.
Order.
Speaking to the point of order.
Speaking to the point of order, Dr.
Pretty
Russel.
much every one of the Prime Minister's answers during this question set have supposed all sorts of things about the Green Party policies. It doesn't seem unreasonable that we should be allowed to characterise the government's anti-green policies.
Order. Order. I don't need further assistance. The question was certainly very, very long. I continue to ask the member to try and curtail the length of his question. I think, frankly, you get a better answer if he did so. But the Prime Minister has been relatively political with his answers, and on that basis I allowed the question to go. I could have ruled it out of order, but the Prime Minister, I felt, may well have given a political flick back, and I certainly would have interfered if he had done so. Further supplementary? Supplementary question, Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Does he agree with economics professor Ottmar Edenhofer, who led the latest intergovernmental panel on climate change team, who said that the cheapest and least risky route to dealing with global warming is to abandon dirty fossil fuels in the coming decades?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, I think it would depend on the country. I mean, if you take New Zealand, half of all of our emissions come from agriculture, so the fastest thing we can do in New Zealand in terms of tackling our greenhouse gas emissions profile, or probably the most successful thing anyway, would be to deal with the issue around agriculture, and that's obviously more challenging, which is why we have the Greenhouse Gas Alliance. But, Mr Speaker, I go back to the point I made earlier. It is remarkable that that member was on his feet a few seconds ago, essentially asking me whether we should be getting rid of fossil fuels, exactly the same time where his power policy that he had announced at that point when he used to get on with the Labor Party, that would lock in exactly that position with Huntley.
What rubbish. Supplementary.
Order.
Supplementary.
Order.
It's rubbish.
Supplementary question, Dr. Russel Norman.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. How does his $46 million annual subsidy to the fossil fuel industry help to create new green businesses and reduce greenhouse emissions?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, again, Mr Speaker, I reject the proposition. What I say is that New Zealand is looking at a range and applying a range of different initiatives to reduce New Zealand's greenhouse gases. I think they are in line with what many other countries are doing, and I welcome the fact that the Green Party is today once and for all making it clear to New Zealand consumers they will be paying a lot more for power and energy in general if he ever makes it to Cabinet, which is going to be tricky because Winston Peters doesn't want him there and the Labor doesn't want to talk to him.
Order. Order.
Now,
We have a supplementary question.
No, Speaker, it's a point of order.
Oh, it's a point of order. Order. And then I require silence so I can hear the point of order from the right honourable gentleman.
It will occur to you that the Prime Minister frequently gets outside his depth on a lot of subjects, but when he talks about our intensity, he's got no idea, and he should not be wasting Parliament's time with those answers.
And that's not a point of order, and it would be helpful if both the Prime Minister and the Right Honourable General didn't waste Parliament's time. Question number 6, Louise Upston.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Social Development.